Hello, El Paso. Welcome to Philosophic Dialogues from La Frontera, where we share the fun of the big questions with you. My name is Dr. Kim Diaz, and I am a philosopher here at EPCC. We are so honored to have Mr. San Roman, Mrs. San Roman today. Mr. San Roman's grandfather, El Pecas, was one of the first Pachucos in El Paso and Juarez. He worked for one of the first radio stations in Juarez alongside Tintan. His grandfather was a chuco, bailarin, that performed at many theatros and clubs all over the US and Mexico. He was a well-known comedian in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He was featured in one of the first Chicano films created named El POCHO. He wore the pachuco style as a symbol of culture, identity, and pride. For Mexicanos and Chicanos who wore this style, it was a way of expressing and representing your identity. Mr. San Roman has a bachelor's degree in Chicano studies and continues the chuco style just like his grandfather did. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
The show is Philosophic Dialogues from La Frontera. Philosophers deal with the big questions, and sometimes we can be very boring and dry. So this is really nice to get to talk with you about beauty, because philosophers ask themselves, what is beauty? And you know, they have a lot of answers that keep us busy, but you take beauty very seriously.
Yes.
In many ways. The way that you dress, to me it's obvious that you go out of your way.
Yes.
To look a certain way.
Yes.
To have a certain style. Why is it important for you to think about beauty? Or maybe before we talk about that, what is beauty to Pachucos?
Beauty is knowing where you come from. That's really important, and your family, and the history that your raza carries, and you carry with it. So it's very important that when we do carry it, we carry it with a lot of pride, and also always looking, how you want to express yourself, always looking sharp and clean.
Why is it important for us to think about beauty?
It's important to think about beauty because when you see yourself as a beautiful living organism, you have to think of, like I said, your culture, your heritage, your family, mm-hmm. and your beliefs, and that's very important.
And it's different, right? The way that you dress is very different than quote-unquote regular people.
Yes.
Certainly very different than traditional styles of beauty that maybe European styles of beauty, I don't know. It's exaggerated in some ways, right?
Yes.
You go out of your way. Why the extra? Why are you all so extra?
The Zoot Suite is so important for El Chicano. My grandpa was, one of the first Pachucos here in El Paso and Juarez, and he, like I said, he would use this style to represent himself, his heritage, his culture, and he would use it at that time, with the country of U.S. and the discrimination towards different cultural
mm-hmm.
heritages. This was a way to express yourself.
It comes at a cost.
Yes, it does.
Tell me about it.
It comes at a very high cost because you when you do what I do, everybody's looking at you, and it's like you're taking the punches for what you believe in. And that is actually the most important thing because you're putting yourself in front for others. I think that's what separates people from other people.
But what do you gain? The cost of not assimilating, right? Not
Right.
assimilating into what is mainstream. Because it would be easier in some ways, I would think, right, if we wear khakis and pastels, right?
Yes.
Gap,
yes.
the mainstream, right? If we just shop at Walmart, or nothing wrong with that, but like you said, you're sticking out.
Right. And
so
that's the whole purpose of the Zoot Suite. There was a lot of other different races that wore the Zoot Suite as well. But for Chicanos, we took it as a adaptation to what was going on.
Tell me more. Let me go back and ask you, for reference, right? You majored in Chicano studies.
Yes.
What is a Chicano? What's a Chicana?
Chicano is a word that was originated from the Mexica tribe. And the Mexica tribe, meaning the Aztecs. If you can tell when you say Chicano, you can see the first pronunciation in Mexica. So it got shortened to Chicano, Mexica. But that's where it originated from. And it's important, that's why it's a sense of identity when you go back to, your very first roots as being a Mexicano. If you take a look at the word Mexicano, it also has a word Mexica in it. If you look at it, but since in the Spanish language, the Spaniards couldn't pronounce the X inside the Mexicano term, so they had named it Mexicano, but it's actually Mexica.
And what do Chicano stand for?
Chicano a lot of people, it's a Mexican American, but I take it a step more.
Right. Why? And because not all Mexican Americans see themselves as Chicanos, right?
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, that's why I take it a step further by saying where it originated from. Because a lot of people, the simple answer is it's a Mexican American. That's what a Chicano is. But when you want to know where the word came from, and that's where you get Mexica, Chicano. And if you can see in the middle of the word, it has the same pronunciation.
This is so meaningful to us here in El Paso, right? Because it's you're representing the beauty of our history, of our people, of our language, our traditions, right, our culture. Even though there's a cost, what is the beauty of, what is the gain, right? So that's why earlier I was like, let me go there, but let's go back to what is a Chicano. So what is beautiful about holding on to your tradition, to your culture?
Well, the first thing gives you identity. And I think that's the whole point of what I do and what my grandpa did. Identity is the most, this is something that no one can take from you. And I think that keeps you going. It gives you purpose. And that's the most important thing anyone can have.
This is something that your mom passed on to you.
Yes.
Earlier before you were talking about how fortunate you felt that the stars aligned in such a way that you are your father's daughter. And, not only how proud you are of him, but how proud you are of you to have passed this.
Yes.
So you must feel, tell me more about your dad and tell me more about your grandpa. Tell us more about el Pecas, right?
Mi papá ya traía eso en su sangre de ser un comediante, comedian. Y él ya lo traía en la sangre. So él cuando tenía 14 años le dijo a su mamá, yo me voy para Juárez. Pues a buscar por la vida, y se vino para Juárez y ahí comenzó todo a descubrirse lo que él hacía, y trabajó con Tintán en la EPCC y la XCW y en la Plaza de Toros y un club que le llamaban La Cucaracha. Comenzaron a traer artistas y es cuando se descubrió, y venía gente del Paso, de donde quiera, y triunfó mucho eso.
Because Juárez was a big, not quite like Las Vegas, right? But it was kind of like the Las Vegas of the time.
Sí, en esos tiempos sí, sí. Muy alusado y la gente muy bonita, todo caminaban ahí como si nada.
Right.
Pero sí, mi papá tuvo muchas amistades, lo querían mucho. Si se acuerda el Pecas, sí, es que seguro que sí. El Pequitas, sí. Y era muy famoso.
And he was a good dancer, huh?
Very good dancer. Yeah.
Well, tell me more about the dance, right? Which is a type of, I mean, it's an art.
Pues era muy bonito porque tengo una foto de él en aquellos tiempos en el teatro. No sé exactamente qué teatro era, pero las mujeres así con unas plumotas y sort of like a bra, ¿verdad?
Mm-hmm.
Y pues muy bonitas así como en bikini, su tacón y todo, y él bailaba con ellas.
¿Qué estilos de baile? We were talking about
que
this.
Era el mambo. Mambo y cha-cha-cha.
Y también el danzón, you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
Sí.
And I wish we could get up and demonstrate, right? but we're hooked up to our mics, so. But then you mentioned other styles también.
Boogie. Boogie was from the 40s. Swing, mambo, cha-cha-cha, danzón, rock and roll, the early stages of rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my grandpa, he started off working at the radio station, one of the first radio stations, so he was one of the first DJs too in this area. He was one of the first pachucos here in El Paso and Juarez. And he worked alongside Tintan, who a lot of people know as a pachuco.
Mm-hmm. His style, right?
Yes.
Like the feather.
Right.
And you brought stuff to share with us. Tell us about the stuff you brought.
This right here is Tintan, mi abuelito, and Marcelo Chavez. All three of them right there at the radio station.
And so then Tintan is the most, for our viewers who probably already know, but just in case, Tintan was, and your grandfather.
Jaime El Pecas Manzano.
And
Marcelo Chavez.
And Marcelo Chavez. So yes, I remember Tintan and Marcelo Chavez being very famous. And Tintan is the one that popularized in TV the pachuco style and dance. And tell us about, so that's your dad?
Yes. This is El Pecas, my father. And this was taken a while back, so you can see it's all
it's all yellowed.
But that's when he would represent what he was doing or trabajaba en el teatro. Salía en el periódico.
Uh-huh.
En el fronterizo, and a lot of newspapers.
We need to have that laminated
Mm-hmm.
for his son. So he can show it. Hold it up.
Yeah,
here he is with Pedro Infante.
Look at that. Looking very pachuco with his suit.
That's a beauty.
That's a great picture.
Muy buenos amigos.
And then tell us about this one.
This is a book. The author is Mike Tapia, very good friend of mine. And it's called Gangs of the Paso and Juarez Borderland by Mike Tapia. My grandpa's featured on page 13. And it goes on to speak about, they're right there.
These are some of the pictures. And that's Tintan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And then my grandpa with Pedro Infante on the side right there. But this book goes on to talk about, the history of why gangs got started. And it was originally Chicano gangs were made to combat police brutality.
All right.
So this book goes into that.
And what about this one over here?
This one is a very important magazine. It has my grandpa in the front cover. On these pages, there he is with Tintan.
Uh-huh. And so it just tells us more history about him.
Yes, it has a whole bunch of history.
And that history is very, now 4 generations.
4
Yes,
generations
yes.
deep. Yes. So there he is right there.
Edición Sur, La Cabeza de Villa. And so this was, what year do you think this was?
This picture was in the 40s, and these theatro pictures were also in the 40s, 50s. And one of the theatros, we have it inside our home on a frame, and it says Tintan y el Pecas.
¿Cómo se llamaba el teatro?
Paramount Theater.
En Los Ángeles.
And that was in LA, and they both came out with Zoot Suits. And they did the play there. And they also did one called Me Traes de una Ala. And they both came out in Zoot Suits and did their play there. And my grandpa, spoke about it, would always speak about it, and he would always tell us about how how they use the Zoot Suit to represent their culture and La Frontera.
I teach, obviously, right, philosophy. So there is a Mexican philosopher that I have a little bit of, I like him, but then I'm critical. And I think it's sometimes important for us to also be critical, right? Mm-hmm. If we just accept everything, there is, I feel, sometimes no progress. And sometimes it's important for us to be critical in a good way. His name is Octavio Paz. You might be familiar with him.
Yes, the author.
Yes. The Labyrinths of Solitude is the name of his book. That book was very influential to me as a philosopher because in college, 30 years ago, when I was going through college, we mostly read Plato, right? The German philosophers, Kant, French philosophers, etc., right? And so my professor at that time, Dr. Simon, he took a tip from a previous philosopher, Jack Haddox. Jack Haddox, long time ago, translated Jose Vasconcelos. And we've been lucky here in El Paso to have people who care to pass on this culture, right?
Right.
And so in the mid-90s, when I was an undergrad, I read Octavio Paz, and it opened my mind up because all I knew was the idea of Europeans and Greeks, right? The Western tradition. So it opened up my mind that, wow, you know what? There's an intellectual tradition from Mexicans. And I started getting more curious, and 30 years later, here I am. But I'm a little critical of Octavio Paz because he was brought up in Mexico, but he did, I think, a few years in LA, and that's in the 40s, so early 40s, and so he encountered Pachucos. Being a Pachuco was a thing in LA, here too in El Paso, right? But his response to los Pachucos was very dismissive because, and Chicanos get this, right, from Mexicanos, that it's like, no, you're not a Mexican. Like, what? No, you're not a Mexican. Like, your Spanish is all broken. Eres pocho, pero Mexicano ya no eres. And so that was actually his presentation of the Pachuco. Extravagant. He has forgotten his culture. And this is why I'm critical, because I don't see it like that at all.
Right.
Tell me more. You take a lot of pride in being a Mexican.
I'm glad that you bring that up, because there's a tie to the symbol of the Pachuco as being like a flamboyance.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back to, again, the Aztecas. If you take a look at the Aztecas uniform, it's very flamboyant. You got feathers, the colors,
mm-hmm.
and the same thing with the Zoot Suit. So it's like they were expressing themselves. I go back to the same word, when you express yourself a certain way, I believe it's the same thing with the Zoot Suite. But since, the Aztec times were, before that era, it came back in the 1940s and 30s, and now, it was like a modern version of a Chicano or a Mexicano's uniform. And I think all cultures have that. And going back to the Mr. Paz, the author, he sees it his way.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I agree with you. I believe that, there's always a purpose to what you do. And as far as the language of my grandpa used to always speak Calo.
Mm-hmm.
And Calo, there's even words in it that have indigenous background for Nahuatl and Nahuatl.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, tienes chicle. A lot of people think chicle is Spanish, but chicle is actually a Nahuatl word. If you say chocolate,
Mm-hmm.
that's a Nahuatl word. If you say aguacate, there's a lot of foods that are also Nahuatl. But if you say chicle, tienes chicle, that's a Nahuatl word. So it's important that we speak that certain language, because, like I said, it always goes back to identity, and it always goes back to expression. So when you speak Calo, quieres ir al borlo, it's a sense of it's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps us strong and keeps us moving forward, and always holds our roots together.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? How to balance the changes,
Mm-hmm.
because I see the change in Spanish itself is a derivation of Latin and Arabic.
Mm-hmm. Arabic. Mm-hmm.
Right? And then when you bring it over to the Americas, it picks up Nahuatl. So the Spanish being spoken in Mexico itself is
Very
a mix,
diverse.
right?
Very
Itself
diverse.
is a mix. So I find it interesting that we want to, in different ways, want to hold on to the roots.
Right.
At the same time, how do we hold on to the roots and stay true to who we are while growing and accepting diversity, right?
That's another key element.
And not, because like here on the border in Juarez, El Paso, we have, there's always a flow, El Paso, right? Mm-hmm. It's a flow of cultures, of languages. And yeah, that is for me the balance, right? When we don't want to assimilate, because there's a cost to assimilation too, right?
Yes.
There's a cost to sticking yourself out, with your flamboyance, but then I'm being criticized for that.
Right.
And probably I wouldn't say also economic, in terms of it might be easier if we assimilate to get a certain job or right? But so there's cost, but there's a cost to assimilation too.
What I learned at UTEP is it's also important to acculturate, because acculturate you can keep your roots, but you can also adapt to certain situations. I learned that at UTEP with my professor, Mr. Ortega, and he always explained and always mentioned acculturation and the difference between acculturation and the difference from assimilation. So acculturation is important. I think we can build off that. I think it's, but like I said, keeping your identity and is the most important.
What kind of music do you listen to?
We listen to everything, from cumbias to mambo to everything, and music also is another thing that keeps evolving. And even when I go out, with friends, or the music now is different. So it's very interesting that when people see me, the way I dress and the way I look, and then they see the music, it just shows an evolution of time. But it's interesting because my roots are still there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm living in the year we are in now.
Recently, one of my students was showing me a song of country rap. And so that is another example, right? Of,
right. It keeps evolving.
Yeah, and for me, others I know that and earlier, they're older, not as old as the 40s, right? But were also madly the other ones, I forget their name, that came with war recently, that take the elements of different cultures and make music, right?
Right.
With much like the pachuco, right? The different elements of the European. I mean, the suit is European.
Yes, it is.
But you make it your own.
Yes. That's and I had mentioned before the Zoot Suite was worn by many races: African Americans, Chicanos, Mexicanos, Italianos.
Mm-hmm. What was happening in the 40s back then?
The 1940s, it was a hard time. It was a hard time.
Why?
There was a lot of discrimination, a lot of racism, and like I said, my grandfather, he was one of the first ones and used the style to combat discrimination. It was a way of combating it, and that's why the pachuco is a symbol for Latinos, because we were using it as a way to combat discrimination.
And I just have so many questions. I have to pick one at a time. The discrimination was happening in the U.S. or in Mexico?
In the U.S., because the Zoot Suite riots took place in L.A.
What were the Zoot Suite riots? Many people might not know about that.
The Zoot Suite riots was a war zone between Chicanos and it's the U.S. military. They went at it for a couple of days, maybe weeks, and there was a case called the Sleepy Lagoon case. Henry Levis, he got criminalized for something that he didn't do.
And that continues.
And that continues today. So, see, that's the point of the Zoot Suite. Is why it's so important for Latinos, for Mexicanos and Chicanos, because of what happened that time and even before. Because discrimination and racism has been around for a long time. It's a very sensitive topic. I got a degree in Chicano studies, so that helps me kind of, navigate my way in talking about it. But it is very sensitive, and I'm always up to the challenge, and I always do it in an educated way. But
and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, and the truth is the truth. The evidence is there. So, but if we can do it in ways with peaceful, like the way we do it with with fashion, with
style,
with style, or speaking very educated but confronting it. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's there, right? And so when discrimination happens, it's easy to feel angry.
Yes.
To feel victimized. And I see that you don't, right? Pachucos don't. You do it with beauty, you do it with style, you do it with pride instead of the victimization. Instead of feeling like a victim, you feel proud,
right,
of your culture.
And that goes with family, because my parents and my grandparents went through a lot as they grew up, and I think that gives us the strength to keep moving forward. Because if you look at everything that has happened, it's amazing how we're able to still move forward, and how we've been able to progress in many different ways.
You didn't come this far to get this far.
Exactly. So that's the plus side.
So you draw strength from the hardships, right?
Yes.
When we edit our video, I'm going to think of the correct quote. It's by Jorge Luis Borges, who is an Argentinian writer. And he has something along the lines of, the short of it is, no mud, no lotus. The flower cannot grow if there's no mud, right? The mud is all the junk, right? And we fertilize our vegetables and we fertilize our gardens with poop, right? And so you draw from all that. We have to, right? So one of my questions to you was exactly that. How is art healing? Because there's even art therapy.
Right.
And so you take beauty, you create beauty to cope. It's a coping mechanism in a way, right?
Yes. Yes, art is very important. All kinds of art, music, fashion, or singing, or painting, or it's a way of expressing yourself.
Why is expressing ourselves so important?
Expressing ourselves is so important because it's something that we build up inside. You know, our feelings, our emotions, and you express them. You know, however your heart and your talents show you. So if you're a painter, you paint, and you paint what you see and what you feel and how you feel.
What happens when we don't express our emotions? It seems to me that our society tells us, and especially men, to suck it up. You know, don't cry.
Right. That's another.
Don't feel. Just be strong. Don't cry.
I took a course, La Chicana, at UTEP, and that also showed me, and I learned a lot that, you know, those are gender roles that are installed in us, but we need to also, you know, show people that, you know, that it's okay to feel a certain way no matter your gender. So that was an important course that I took, La Chicana, and it gave me a different perspectives and different viewpoints as to how we go about that.
You mentioned at the beginning of our interview, we're an organism. We're a live being, right?
Yes.
Right? And so all creatures, male or female, have feelings.
Yes.
You know, my turtle, when I startle my turtle, she goes in her shell, right? And so because we feel threatened or we feel hurt, dogs growl, cats hiss, right? And so we, as living organisms, we all have feelings, and if we don't express them, what happens?
If you don't express them, you know, it builds up. You know, and I think getting educated, or, you know, reading, I always tell people to read about your history, one's history, because that shows you the patterns and what went on. And me being a, you know, Chicano studies major, and it's a lot of history in there. It really shows you and really gives you that perspective as to, okay, what do we got to do now, or what do we got to do in the future? And even what's going on, you know, with the upcoming election, the situations that are happening, it's very unfortunate. But I think that, you know, education plays a key role in that. You know, what we teach our students in our communities in the public schools is very important. I've worked with Georgina C. Perez, who's an educator for the Isleta Independent School District. And we've tried to put, you know, ethnic studies inside the public schools. That's very important, because that teaching young people at an early age about history and where we're at right now and what happened before us is just very important.
It's important so we know our history, so we know our culture, so we have a sense of pride, so that we learn how to express ourselves, learn dance, learn ways, right? Like you said, art, different, you know, painting,
yes.
Music, dance, so that we can express all of that. Do I have that right?
Yes. If you go to Chicano Park, Lincoln Park, you'll see paintings there that a lot of Chicano artists that are my friends have underneath the freeway, and you can see there the history. And a lot of people if you read between the lines on those paintings, you see a lot of the history of Mexicanos and Chicanos. And that's like, that's one way of expression. In one of my courses at UTEP, they would always give us a painting and we would have to write and speak about what we saw in that painting. And out of all 30 students, everyone had a different answer. And there was no right or wrong answer, but if you saw the picture and read between the lines, you can tell a lot about that one painting or that one mural.
Anger. I'm going to go back to anger, right? Anger and sadness, which are human emotions, and sometimes with discrimination, at least in my I should speak for myself, right? Those are my first feelings. And it takes quite a bit of work to not react out of anger and or to give up out of sadness. So what is the process for Pachucos to be beautiful, right? To be aesthetic instead of react in ways that are, well, obviously, you know, when you create art, for me, it's going to be more long-lasting than something reactive that might express those feelings and get those feelings out of your system, but would have worse consequences in the long run, right? So what is the process? How do you go back to your roots to hold on tight to that?
That is a good question. I think you have to really, dig deep and find that love, because a lot of the assimilation that's occurring is a systematic racism, or racism that has been built up, or discrimination that has been built up inside society. And I think it's important that people look into the mirror and look into their history and find that love. And that's another key part that a lot of people need to find is love. I think that's what we need the most right now.
Love and beauty, peace, music.
Yes.
Community, family.
Yes.
These are all beautiful to me, beautiful values, right?
Yes.
And that you stand for. And again, it's so important for us to. There is a way in which, like, why are you still talking about the 1940s? Why are you still talking about what happened with, Tintan or in the 70s, right?
The Chicano movement.
Yeah, right. We're so, you can't say we had a black president, come on,
I got to interview Dolores Huerta.
Tell me more.
Who is one of my heroes. She worked with Cesar Chavez, and I got to interview her, and they had made a movie about her called Dolores.
Mm-hmm.
That same year I interviewed her, she got an award from Barack Obama. And I got to interview her a year later, and it was like a dream come true for me because of what I do. And when I got to interview her, and it was a beautiful thing. So I got to meet my hero.
And Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez are also, for us, very examples, people we look up to, right? Of
Yes.
People who very committed. I mean, Dolores Huerta is still giving talks,
Yes.
She's still very active.
And she's in her 80s.
Yeah.
But she's still going.
When you met her, you were all excited.
Yes.
And he tells me, she's coming to UTEP, and I'm like, who is she? And it's just a very important person, Mom. She does she used to do what I'm doing, or she still does it. She's like 90 something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, let's go. And when I saw her, I said, oh my gosh, a person so young and so interested in trying to meet that lady. But then I put everything together. I said, she did the same thing. And she was still doing the same thing at that time. So I said, qué importante es saber que él quería conocer a esa persona por lo que ella hacía. And she was very proud of him too. She says, I really admire you in what you're doing, because a lot of young people don't even know who they are. But it was a very exciting day for him and for me too, because I said, wow, not knowing her. And then when I met her, to me, she's a very important person.
It's
because she has a lot to say.
It's crazy, you know, because activists, but they led by example, and they promoted peace.
Yes.
They're so big on being nonviolent. They were a very nonviolent movement, and that's why they were so successful.
Yes.
And again, it's like, well, if they can do it, then we can do it too, right? Where they promote kindness, they promote peace, fasting, to to really think through what is the ultimate goal here, so that we continue to feel proud of ourselves, right? Instead of like all of us, I mean, you know, how many times have I been upset that then I say the wrong thing, it comes out wrong, and maybe I even mean to be hurtful, right? But then we have to apologize. So this really strong awareness to stay beautiful, to stay kind.
It's very important.
Yeah, this is just, this is so awesome. Do you all have any questions for us? I have more questions for you, right? So are you committed then to passing it on to the younger generations for yourself?
Yes, and that's why I always bring up the fact of we need to put, you know, the ethnic cultural studies inside public schools, because I think that's the way to get, you know, the points across, and I think we'll make a lot of progress that way. And I think we'll spread more love, because a lot of people will know more about each other and understand each other, and that's the most important.
And I'm all excited because of your son. He's a year old, and we went to take pictures with him, and he dressed him exactly like him, and he looks adorable. So there you go, there's another generation to look forward, you know. So he's going to carry that, you know, when he grows up. He's going to talk about his father, his dad, and his grandpa. Oh no, his great-grandpa.
His great-grandpa.
So that's how amazing, huh? That all this goes on by, you know, generation to generation. So
what is
it's beautiful.
What is the? We always think of pachucos mostly, right? Tell me about pachucas.
Pachucas. Well, I've seen quite a few. They seem very proud of what they are. I usually don't dress a lot like this, but when we have events, I do. I want to show people who I am and what we do, and I'm very proud of who we are.
We do a lot of events for the community. We do a lot of, you know...
for the children that have cancer.
We do school supply drives, and because a lot of times they associate how we look with gangs, but we try and show, you know, the community and the people that, you know, Chicanos, we're normal people and regular people, and we do help each other out, and so we do events for the community, and we give back to the community.
You don't just give back, you embrace the community. Right. And it's important for us to continue to do this, right? For ourselves, for us to figure out how to tell our story in a way that is beautiful, we're hoping for change, but it's not looking very good.
Yeah.
So that we can continue, right? To continue to draw back and then help the younger generations. And so so this is interesting for me, right? It's great for us to have you here in La Frontera, where it's not our language or culture is nothing. It's so the opposite of being ashamed of of how I speak Spanish or how I speak, if I speak English with a certain accent, right? It is this standing proud and beautiful.
I think it's very important that, you know, that we are different, that people are different, because that makes us unique, that makes the world unique. And that's very important as well. A lot of people want everybody to be the same. And if everybody's the same, then, you know, what do we get out of that? But being different and embracing, accepting it is what makes the world a better place.
One of my teachers does a lot with jazz. He's a jazz critic. If you know a little bit of music, you know you can't have a song if all the instruments are playing the same, if it's just one instrument, right? You need to have variety. You need to mix it up in terms of the rhythm. You need to have different voices, different instruments.
Right.
For us to create something beautiful.
For us to create a new sound or a unique sound. Yes, I agree. So yeah, but like I said, you know, it's important that progress starts with education. I think if you teach, you know, people at a young age, you know, history, the cultures, the different heritages and everything like that, I think that makes us go forward and makes everything, you know, better.
And you're coming at it from a very, I think, accessible place, right? Because I'm sure little kids are curious about your chain, your cool shoes, and they ask you, right? Like they want to touch things.
Right.
So even if kids may not be interested in reading a book, the music, you putting yourself out there publicly, the music draws them in, right?
Right.
Makes them curious.
And I think that's where the art comes in, because you can use art now, not only just, you know, physically right there, but also through TV, through you know, cell phones now and the way we use cell phones now. So I think that's also an important thing, that we use the technology we have now. It's only one, you know, you can look up history or anything you want one click away.
Right.
So that's interesting too, how, you know, how we've kind of taken steps back in terms of you know, the times we're living in and the setbacks that are happening in society. But if we were to just use education and use the technology, I think we could, you know, really make big steps, big steps for the good.
That is interesting, because information is more accessible, but it seems like we're not really moving forward.
Yes.
Although I do think that we are moving forward, you know.
Well, by coming here, I think by people seeing all this might open their eyes and understand a little bit of what's going on and went on, and hopefully they explore all this, that we're our culture, that we are who we are, and that they understand who they are. I think that's very important to know where you're coming from. When I used to go to school, they never taught me about who I was. I would just hear about George Washington, Lincoln, and when you're young, well, you don't understand what's going on, but you know, that's what they taught us. And I think it's time for us to, you know, for our kids to learn who they are. Because sometimes you ask them and they're like, no, I don't speak Spanish, no. Well, I'm talking about my grandkids, you know. And I think it's very important to know both languages and know who they are.
In Lincoln Park, how often do Pachucos and Chicanos meet?
Well, they have the big events in September. The big events, and they have the lowriders out there, and everybody, you know, cook out and see the murals and see the cars. The lowriders is also another expression.
Dimension.
Yes, it's like the Zoot Suite. Mm-hmm. The lowriders also tell a story. And if you go back to the history of lowriders too, the discrimination existed there too. It was a way of, you know, Chicanos expressing themselves through their vehicles. And police would also, you know, profile. Mm-hmm. And that was another situations that occurred, you know, in the history of Chicanos.
And so then the events at Lincoln Park are, I think, good events, very family oriented, right?
Yes. There's a lot of things going on there, and you know, so you get to have, the kids get to have fun, and the Pachucos are there, and the lowriders and music. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
Food and murals.
Food, oh yes, especially food, yeah.
So most of them have been in September, so...
September, March, Cesar Chavez Day.
Okay.
Yes.
Cesar Chavez Day is another one in September.
There is this, like you were saying, the look is associated with gangs and the racial profile, right? And to me, I feel like, okay, even in a way, it's like I don't care if it is. Those are our youth. Mm-hmm. You know, those are our youth, and if they're involved with gangs at the time, then it is what it is. But I still want them to learn about love and peace and understanding, and leave the anger.
Yes.
Leave the violence. That, you know, they may not have been fortunate enough to have had parents like yourself.
Right.
Right, or the opportunities to learn how to express themselves creatively. But, you know, then, okay, you're interested in the looks. Look, if you do a little more, if you dig a little deeper, look at what you can find, right? One of my favorite Chicano poets is Jimmy Santiago Vaca. I'm sure you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. So similarly, you know, he was involved in the justice system, and but there he learned how to become a poet, how to express himself in ways that are beautiful and very impactful and peaceful. And so we all have different paths.
What's interesting about that is the gangs that originally formed during that time were actually created to combat police brutality. See, a lot of times the original Chicano gangs, they don't speak about that part. But the Chicano gangs actually originated and formed to protect the barrio from the police. So I think that always gets left out. But that's very important that people know why it formed. But like anything else, the gangs have evolved. But the original purpose of a Chicano gang was to combat police brutality. So I always mention that because a lot of people were like, oh, so they get that different perspective as to why was the gang formed. Mm-hmm. So because a lot of the barrio gangs weren't, you know, they didn't have money. They weren't making money. It was just Chicano gangs were formed to protect the barrio.
I think it was in the 1930s. There's so many instances, right? Here in Texas, there were lynchings.
Yes. I know a famous author that wrote a book called Texas Lynching. And it's about, you know, what they had done to us in that time here in Texas. A lot of people don't know that either. And I always tell a lot of people that Mexicanos and African Americans have, the same struggles. And I always point that out to people so they can see that, also that perspective as to, wow, there's other races that have gone through, struggles and obstacles and things that happened in the past. And it's important to talk about them. And I always tell people, like I said before, it's a sensitive topic because, but I always try and go out about it a very educated way, in a very soft way, and try and get that point across before, and then start talking about what happened.
Yeah, I mean, just like we were talking about emotions, right? If you don't talk about it, where does it go? Those emotions in a person, right? That suffering, that anger, that sadness of not just personally, right? But if I lose my toenail, my foot hurts, that affects how I'm walking. Mm-hmm. Then it throws out my back. So it's not just because of my toenail, the whole system is affected, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just that one person that suffered that experience. It's the parents of that person. It's the children of that person.
Right.
How can we then go back with grace and beauty and heal from those experiences so that we can feel proud and continue moving forward, right?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to accomplish, and like I said, everybody's different. Not everybody's fortunate or even has the capability of doing certain things, but everybody has their own talent. That I do believe in, because we're our Creator that created us gives us all a talent, and we find it and use it and build off that
to create beauty.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. So beauty is not only a concept, you live it. You live it. You bring very deliberately, you gather your experiences to live your beauty, and then consequently you're proud, right, of who you are, because it's interesting, right? Could we create beauty without pain, do you think?
I know, I think they both go together. Beauty and pain have to go together, because that's what the pain actually creates a beauty.
Not always. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes the way it's expressed, it's ugly, right?
Yeah, but I think it's necessary, because I also studied a lot of indigenous courses going back to the Mexica, the Aztecas. Mm-hmm. And life is about wars, constant wars. And not just war like a battlefield war, but war as in everything is a struggle. Like when you wake up in the morning, it's a struggle. It's a war. When you get sick, there's a internal war between, the virus and your body, or your immune system. Mm-hmm. So that's a war in itself. Mm-hmm. So that's those courses of indigenous studies really helped me see all that. Is that everything's a war. Everything's a war. And it's a constant struggle, but we keep going because that's part of life. So that was a good courses that really gave me that viewpoint as to, wow, everything's a struggle, but pain is part of that beauty.
Yeah, without the struggle, we never find out. It would be difficult to be a patient person if there wasn't something irritating me, right?
Right.
So then ultimately, do you feel fortunate for your struggles? Should we feel fortunate as Chicanos for the struggles that we've had?
That's a good question.
And that we will continue to have, right?
Right.
Because we're fighting them, right? But
and it's interesting because without the struggles, where would I be right now? See, my struggles actually brought me to this interview right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's interesting because the struggles made me what I am right now. So I think that's
so
a good.
it's all connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because,
Yeah.
you know, a right turn here, a left turn here. Am I going to be right here?
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting how that got brought up. But the struggles make you who you are. So everything that happened before me and my history, my with my family and everything, it brought me right here, right now. So that's interesting.
But the trick is to do it the way that you are doing it, beautifully, peacefully, taking care of each other. You know, thinking of the future instead of just yourself and the struggle that you're feeling right now, right?
Right.
But just having a wider perspective than just ourselves. So it's just been such an honor to have you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. San Roman, Mr. San
for
Roman.
having us here. It was a pleasure.
I'm really glad that it worked out. Thank you to our crew and our
Thank you.
viewers. We hope you enjoyed this beautiful interview. Please join us next time.